Amaka stepped out of the yellow taxi, her breath hitching as she stared at the gates of Atlantic Royal Academy. She had only been in Lagos for 3 weeks, a returnee from a quiet life in London, thrust into the chaotic heat of Nigeria. She didn't know that her accent, a soft blend of British vowels and Igbo rhythm, was a target. She didn't know that her dark, unrelaxed natural hair was a signal for war. The bullying didn't wait for an introduction. It began the moment she crossed the threshold of the assembly hall. She felt the eyes, hundreds of them, but one pair burned hotter than the rest. Chike Uzo stood at the center of the courtyard, surrounded by his disciples. He was the sun around which the school orbited, son of an oil magnate, top of the class, and possessor of a smile that could hide 1,000 daggers. He didn't see a new student. He saw a challenge to his undisputed territory. He whispered a single word to his friends, and the laughter that followed was the first stone thrown in a war that would last for years. The campaign against Amaka wasn't subtle, it was a siege. It started with the mockery of the tongue. Every time Amaka opened her mouth to answer a question in further maths, Chike was there, mimicking her British inflection with a cruel, exaggerated twist. He turned her intelligence into a punchline. By the end of the first week, the accidents began. In the crowded cafeteria, a tray of jollof rice slipped from Chike's hand, drenching Amaka's white uniform in oily red stains. The hall went silent, waiting for her to cry. Chike leaned in, his face inches from hers, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. Lagos is hot, London girl. Maybe the rice will warm up your cold blood. He expected a breakdown. Instead, Amaka stood still, her jaw locked so tight it ached. She didn't wipe the rice away. She looked him dead in the eye, her silence louder than his mockery. She walked out of the hall with her head held high, leaving Chike staring at his empty hands, his first victory feeling strangely hollow. Chike realized quickly that Amaka wouldn't break with physical pranks, so he moved to the digital shadows. He was a master of the school's anonymous forums. That night, a flurry of posts went live. They weren't just insults, they were fabrications. They claimed Amaka's father had been deported, that her mother was a disgraced socialite, that she was pretending to be rich to fit in. The next morning, the school was a minefield of whispers. Teachers looked at her with pity, students moved their bags when she tried to sit down. Amaka felt the walls closing in. Every notification on her phone was a new barb. She walked through the hallways feeling like a ghost, haunting her own life. But even as the anxiety clawed at her stomach, she refused to give him the satisfaction of a public tear. She spent her lunch breaks in the abandoned art room, pouring her rage into a sketchbook, drawing Chike not as a king, but as a hollow man made of glass. The second term brought a change in seating arrangements that felt like a death sentence. The class teacher, oblivious to the war, placed Amaka directly next to Chike at the back of the room. Amaka froze when she saw the chart. She walked to the desk, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Chike was already there, leaning back in his chair, his long legs stretched out to block her path. "Welcome to my kingdom, Londoner," he muttered, not looking up from his phone. "I hope you brought your thick skin. You're going to need it." The first hour was a masterpiece of psychological torture. He tapped his heavy metal ruler against the desk rhythmically while she tried to take notes. He whispered snide remarks to the boy behind them about smelly immigrants. When she finally reached for her pen, he swiped it off the desk with a casual flick of his wrist. Amaka watched the pen roll under a cabinet. She didn't move to get it. She simply took a second pen from her bag and continued writing, her hand steady even as her vision blurred with fury. The breaking point came on a Tuesday, during a heavy Lagos downpour that turned the schoolyard into a grey mist. Amaka had stayed behind in the classroom to work on a charcoal portrait. It was her sanctuary, the only place where she wasn't the Londoner or the target. Chike walked in, his varsity jacket dripping with rain, his presence instantly sucking the air out of the room. He walked straight to her desk and peered at the sketchpad. "Another drawing of your miserable life," he sneered, reaching out to smudge the charcoal with his thumb. Amaka didn't flinch. She grabbed his wrist with a strength that shocked both of them. Her eyes were fire. "I draw things that have a soul, Chike," she said, her voice a low, dangerous vibration, "which is why you will never be on this paper. You are just a suit with a loud voice and a hollow chest." The silence that followed was heavy with the scent of rain and ozone. Chike's smirk didn't just fade, it evaporated. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a victim, but as a force. He pulled his hand away and walked out without a word. The following day, the school expected a massacre. Everyone assumed Chike would retaliate with twice the venom, but something had changed in the atmosphere. Chike arrived late to class and sat in his seat without a single comment. There was no pencil tapping, no whispers, no stolen pens. When a girl in the front row tried to make a joke about Amaka's hair, Chike didn't laugh. He turned a cold, silencing gaze on the girl until she looked away in confusion. Amaka felt the change like a shift in barometric pressure. She kept her guard up, waiting for the hidden trap, the grand finale of his cruelty, but it didn't come. Instead, during a literature quiz, Amaka realized she had forgotten her eraser. Before she could even ask the person behind her, Chike's hand appeared in her peripheral vision. He placed a brand new white eraser on her desk and withdrew his hand instantly, his eyes fixed firmly on the blackboard. Amaka stared at the eraser as if it were a bomb. She didn't say thank you, she didn't use it, but the butterflies in her gut were no longer made of lead. The library at Atlantic Royal was a labyrinth of mahogany shells and silence. Amaka was tucked away in a corner of the second floor, her headphones on, lost in a painting of the Lagos Lagoon. She was so deep in the zone that she didn't hear the footsteps on the carpet. She felt a presence and looked up, expecting the librarian. It was Chike. He wasn't smirking, he wasn't leaning back in that arrogant posture. He was just standing there, looking at her work. "The perspective on the water is perfect," he said, his voice a rich, steady baritone she hadn't heard without a layer of sarcasm. Amaka stared at him, her brushes poised like weapons. "What do you want, Chike? Is there a joke I'm missing?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture of genuine awkwardness that didn't fit the king persona. "No joke. You're actually talented, probably the most talented person in this place." He stayed for a minute longer, the air between them thick with years of unsaid apologies, before he turned and disappeared into the stacks. Amaka sat there for an hour, unable to paint another stroke. The rain in Lagos is relentless, a wall of water that stops the city in its tracks. Most students had been picked up by their drivers, but Amaka was waiting for her aunt, who was stuck in traffic on the Third Mainland Bridge. She stood under the eaves of the art block, watching the water cascade off the roof. "You shouldn't wait here alone," a voice said. Chike was standing behind her, holding a large black umbrella. He stepped forward, the dampness of the air clinging to his hair. "Why are you being like this?" Amaka said, her voice trembling with the weight of years of torment. "You spent 4 years making me hate every morning I woke up. You made me feel like an alien. Why are you suddenly holding an umbrella for me?" Chike looked out at the rain, his jaw tight. "I was a coward," he quietly said. "You are the only person who didn't bow to me. You are strong and independent and different. I didn't know how to handle that, so I tried to break you to make myself feel powerful. But the truth is, I was just jealous of your light." The rain didn't let up, and the silence between them was louder than the thunder. "I don't need your pity, Chike," Amaka said, stepping into the downpour, but the umbrella followed her. Chike walked beside her, his shoulder brushing hers, shielding her from the deluge. "It's not pity," he countered. "It's a ride home." They reached the gate where his black Mercedes G-Wagon sat idling. For the first time, Amaka didn't see the car as a symbol of his arrogance, but as a sanctuary. They drove through the flooded streets of Lekki in a heavy, charged silence. When they reached her aunt's modest gate, Chike killed the engine. "I'm not asking for a reset," he said, staring at the steering wheel. "I just want you to know that I see you now, not the London girl, just Amaka." He didn't wait for a response. He drove off, leaving Amaka standing in the mud, her heart pounding a rhythm that felt dangerously like hope. The shift in Chike's behavior didn't go unnoticed by the vultures of Atlantic Royal. During lunch the next day, Segun, who was Chike's longtime enforcer, slammed a tray down. "Bro, what's with the charity work? I saw you driving the Londoner yesterday." The table went quiet, waiting for the punchline. Chike didn't even look up from his pasta. "Her name is Amaka, and she's not charity." Segun laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, I get it. You're playing the long game. Break her heart instead of her lockers. hers. Chike stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. He leaned over the table, his shadow falling over Segun like a mountain. If I hear another word about her from any of you, we will have a problem that your father's money won't fix. He walked away, leaving the most popular table in the school in a state of absolute shock. Amaka, watching from the corner, felt a shiver that wasn't from the air conditioning. The bully had become the bodyguard. 3 days later, Amaka found a small brown paper package in her locker. Inside was a high-end leather sketchbook and a set of professional charcoal pencils, the kind you could only get at the specialty shops in Victoria Island. There was no note, but she knew the scent of the paper. It smelled like his car, leather and expensive oud. She didn't return it. That afternoon in the library, she sat in their corner and opened the first page. She didn't draw the lagoon. She drew a pair of eyes, intense, shadowed, and full of a regret that seemed too heavy for a teenager to carry. She was halfway through the shading when a shadow fell over the page.
Amaka finally looked up, her pulse racing. "How did you get that scar?" Chike sat down, his usual armor completely gone. "My father. He doesn't like second place. I guess that's why it was so hard on you. I thought life was just a series of things to conquer." Graduation night was a blur of white silk and expensive champagne. The class of greatness was moving on to Ivy League schools and London universities. Amaka stood on the balcony of the Oriental Hotel, looking out at the lights of the city she had finally learned to call home. Chike appeared beside her, looking lethal in a bespoke black tuxedo. "I'm going to Yale," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. "I'm going to Chelsea College of Arts," Amaka replied. They were worlds apart again. Chike reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold charm, a tiny, perfectly detailed palette. He placed it in her hand. "Don't let the world dim your colors, Amaka. And don't forget the boy who tried to break you." He leaned in, his lips brushing her cheek for a fraction of a second, a ghost of a kiss that promised a future they weren't ready for. "When I'm man enough for you, I'll find you." 10 years in Lagos is a lifetime. The city had grown taller, greedier, and faster. Amaka was no longer the girl in the stained uniform. She was the creative director of Aura Studios, the most sought-after gallery in West Africa. She moved through the high-stakes world of corporate art with a grace that masked her iron interior. She had heard whispers of Chike over the years, Yale graduate, the new CEO of Uzo Global, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and a total lack of a social life. He was the ghost of Lagos business. Amaka told herself she had moved on. She had dated architects and investors, but every time a man smiled, she looked for a crooked edge. Every time someone bought her flowers, she remembered orchids that needed a specific temperature. She was successful, wealthy, and profoundly alone until the morning a letter arrived on her desk with a seal she hadn't seen in a decade. The letter was a formal invitation to pitch for the interior branding of the new Uzo Global headquarters, a billion-naira project that would put Aura Studios on the global map. Amaka's assistant was ecstatic, but Amaka felt a cold stone of anxiety drop into her stomach. She walked into the boardroom of the Uzo Tower on a Monday morning, her heels clicking against the marble with a military precision. She wore a power suit of deep violet, her natural hair styled into a magnificent crown. The mahogany doors opened, and there he was. Chike didn't look like a boy anymore. He was a titan. His ebony skin was polished to a high shine, and his charcoal suit fit him like armor. He was surrounded by directors, but his eyes were locked on her the moment she entered. He didn't smile, he didn't nod. He simply gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Proceed, Miss Amaka. Show me why you're the best." For 45 minutes, Amaka didn't pitch, she performed. She spoke of the intersection of traditional Nigerian motifs and modern corporate glass. She spoke of identity and the strength of the returnee. She used her voice like a cello, rich, commanding, and steady. The room was mesmerized, but Chike remained a statue of stone. When she finished, the room was silent. Chike leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "It's too safe," he said. His voice sent a jolt through her spine. "I don't want a gallery. I want a statement of war. I want the people who walk into this building to know that we survived the fire." He dismissed the room with a sharp wave of his hand, leaving only Amaka standing before him. He stood up and walked around the table, stopping just inches from her. "You've gotten better at hiding your scars, Amaka, but your art still screams." "Why did you call me here, Chike? Is this just another way to remind me of your power?" Amaka's voice was sharp, a weapon she had spent years honing. Chike didn't flinch. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawl of Victoria Island. I've spent 10 years building this empire so I could be the man I promised I'd be on that balcony. He turned back to her, and for the first time she saw the boy from the library, the one with the heavy eyes. I didn't call you for a pitch. I called you because I'm tired of being a king in an empty castle. I've watched every gallery opening you've had. I've bought your paintings through anonymous proxies. I own a house full of your soul, but I don't have the woman. He stepped into her space, the scent of oud and rain hitting her like a physical blow. Amaka's breath hitched. You own my art? You bought my soul through proxies? The accusation hung heavy in the air, a decade of buried resentment rising to the surface. Chike met her gaze, his own eyes burning with an intensity that matched hers. Every piece, the early charcoals, the defiant oils, the collection called Echoes of the Unbroken. I've been your silent patron, Amaka. I kept a piece of you with me because I never forgot the girl who told me I had a hollow chest. That moment changed everything. It broke the boy and started building the man you see now. He paused, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. Every board meeting, every ruthless deal, every lonely night in this tower, it was all to become worthy of walking back into your light. I needed to prove to myself that I could protect it, not crush it. Amaka walked to a minimalist sculpture near the window, her fingers tracing its cold metallic surface. Protection? You taught me how to fight, Chike. You taught me to build walls so high no man could ever scale them. You taught me that my light was a target. She turned to face him, her eyes flashing. Do you know how many nights I spent staring at the ceiling, replaying your insults, building myself brick by brick so no one like you could ever touch me again? You talk about being worthy, but you broke something in me that I'm not sure even I can fix. Chike flinched as if struck. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out, then pulling back. I saw your exhibition, Fragments of Fire. I saw the anger, the resilience. It's magnificent. But I also saw the pain. I didn't want to just buy the art. I wanted to dismantle the cage I helped build around your heart. The tension in the ultra-modern office was suffocating. Chike walked over to a concealed panel in the wall and pressed a hidden button. A vast screen descended, displaying a high-resolution image. It was a photograph of a painting. Amaka's earliest, most vulnerable work, a self-portrait from her art school days, depicting a young woman with defiant eyes standing alone against a backdrop of shadowy figures. It was the painting she had made after her worst bullying incident, a raw expression of her isolation. This piece was never for sale, Amaka breathed, her voice barely a whisper. How did you get it? Chike's gaze softened. It was the first piece I bought. It was my reminder, my penance. Every morning I saw it, the face of the girl I hurt, staring back at the man I wanted to become. It kept me honest. It kept me walking. The sudden ring of Chike's desk phone shattered the moment. His expression hardened as he listened. What? Uzo Global is under a hostile takeover attempt? Who? He slammed the phone down, his eyes blazing. Minji, he snarled, a name from their past. Minji Oladabo. Her father's conglomerate is making a move. She's been circling my company for months, waiting for a weakness. Amaka's mind raced. Minji, the queen bee from Atlantic Royal, the girl who always resented Amaka's quiet strength and Chike's effortless popularity. The old rivalries, the unspoken resentment suddenly morphed into a corporate war. She knew about us in school, Amaka stated, her sharp with realization. She hated that you even looked at me. This isn't just business, Chike, it's her revenge. She's trying to dismantle your empire piece by piece to get at us. Chike slammed his fist on the desk. She thinks I'm distracted. She thinks she can use my past against me. He looked at Amaka, his eyes now filled with a desperate plea she hadn't seen since that rainy day in secondary school. I can fight her in the boardroom, but she's targeting my reputation, my relationships. She'll use our story to paint me as unstable, a liability. She's already leaking rumors. Amaka took a deep breath. Her mind, honed by years of navigating the cutthroat art world, was already formulating a plan. She's using your weakness against you. We'll use your strength. You need to go public, not just about the hostile takeover, but about us. Tell the world what you told me in this room, that the boy you were tried to break me, and the man you became wants to protect me. She wants a scandal? Give her a love story that outshines it. That night, the internet exploded. Chike Uzo, the reclusive titan of industry, posted a raw, unfiltered video on his social media. It wasn't about the hostile takeover. It was about Amaka. He spoke about his years of bullying, his jealousy, his regret. He spoke about her art, her strength, her quiet defiance that had changed him. He showed her self-portrait, the one from her art school days, explaining its meaning. If standing beside her makes me weak, then I never want to be strong again. Amaka, I spent years trying to break you. Now I want to spend a lifetime building you up. The comment section, usually a cesspool of corporate speculation, flooded with shock, awe, and an outpouring of support. It was a gamble that shattered his polished image, but in doing so, revealed his soul. Minji's meticulously planned corporate ambush began to crumble. Her father's board, shocked by Chike's unprecedented public vulnerability and the groundswell of public empathy, began to question her strategy. She had expected a corporate brawl. She got a love story that resonated across the continent. Her attempts to spin the narrative as a PR stunt fell flat. People saw a man owning his past, not escaping it. Students from Atlantic Royal, now adults, started sharing their own stories of Chike's bullying and his subsequent transformation, validating his confession. Amaka's social media, usually reserved for art, filled with messages of solidarity from women across Africa who recognized her struggle and celebrated her resilience. The hostile takeover wasn't just losing momentum, it was bleeding goodwill, reputation, and ultimately investor confidence. The climax came swiftly. Minji's hostile takeover collapsed spectacularly. Her company's stock plummeted, and her father, furious at the public relations disaster, pulled all support. Minji disappeared from the headlines as quickly as she had emerged. Chike, however, emerged stronger. His raw honesty had stripped away his untouchable facade, revealing a man capable of growth, regret, and profound love. It resonated with the older generation who valued character over a flawless image. The Uzo Global Headquarters project, now a symbol of redemption and resilience, was officially awarded to Aura Studios. It wasn't just a contract, it was a partnership built on shared history, earned trust, and a future they were now actively shaping together.
Months later, Amaka walked through the nearly completed Uzo Global building, the scent of fresh paint and possibility filling the air. Her art, vibrant and powerful, adorned every floor, a testament to her journey. Chike met her on the rooftop garden, the Lagos skyline sprawling beneath them. He wasn't in a suit. He wore a simple linen shirt, his sleeves rolled up. He held out a small, intricately carved wooden bird. "This is for your office," he said. "It's a symbol of the Ngwa, the bird that sings the truth even in the darkest forest." Amaka smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "You said you didn't want a gallery. You wanted a statement of war. You got a masterpiece of peace, Chike." He stepped closer, taking her hand. "No, Amaka, I got a life. And for the first time, it feels like home." They stood there, two souls who had once been adversaries, now bound by a tapestry of shared pain and unwavering trust, ready to build a future that screamed with the power of their unbroken love.